Hey guys, David Villa here. Welcome to GC Talks. I'm going to interview Ben Curry. He's a friend of mine, a fellow entrepreneur and business owner. Started his business just 4 years ago, has grown it into the multiple seven figures, and he's going to talk about kingdom business and how God helped him do that. This is a great episode. Don't miss it. All right, my guest today is a bold leader who is redefining what excellence looks like in the logistics world. Ben Curry is a founder and CEO of Curry Freight Solutions, where he leads a 24/7, 365-day transportation operation serving manufacturing and distribution customers with excellence, precision, and purpose. But Ben's mission goes beyond freight. He's building what he calls a team of logistics Spartans, committed to raising the bar in an industry that's often plagued by subpar support. What sets Ben apart is his leadership, and it's rooted in faith. He's passionate about showing the love of Jesus Christ in every customer and carrier interaction. Ben, man, welcome to GC Talks.
David,
how you doing?
It is an honor. Thank you so much, man.
We've been friends for a while now. I think we've known each other for a couple years, at least, probably 2 years.
Yeah, right when we moved down to Tampa in 21, I think we got connected with the small business group immediately. And
so it was probably even closer to 3 years or so.
I think so, yeah.
And so we have some similarities as well, industry-wise. We connected instantly through the business group, but also, you had a background in kind of doing some things that we do here, and that kind of segued you into what you do now. So, So a lot of synergies there, man. I love your passion. Since we've known each other, I know that not only, were you starting a business and building it, we're going to talk about that. You got married, and God's just blessing you guys. And so, just to kind of dive into, your story a little bit. So kind of looking at the foundation, right? The calling, or the foundation of it, share a little bit of your story behind, starting your company, and, what was the kingdom vision? Maybe you didn't have that at first, but or the calling that inspired you to begin in the first place.
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Houday.
Yeah, Bengals fan.
Big Bengals fan. Born and raised in Cincinnati. I grew up extremely competitive, wrestling, playing baseball, and I got to witness firsthand my father just work hard. He is probably the hardest working guy I've ever met. So early on, he instilled what hard work was in me. Fast forward to 2017 is when I jumped into the wild and wonderful world of logistics.
Right.
Worked for a large firm in Cincinnati. I immediately was drawn to that fast-paced sale, that boiler room kind of environment. I thrived in it. Throughout my time at that firm, I did fairly well. I was passionate about serving the team, finding opportunities and providing values to our clients. However, I'd say close to the end of my career, my tenure at that firm, I was overlooked for a few promotions. Certain things happened where God's plan in the end played out, and if it didn't play out that way, I probably wouldn't be sitting with you here right now. So 21, I left. I ended up having to wait out a non-compete, which was excruciating, which is where I jumped into the automotive marketing world with my father-in-law. Incredible company. Was I good at it? No. But I knew from the time I left there, man, I was going to do this. We were going to jump into starting our own deal, and I just read and connected with anybody that I possibly could who had done this before. What inspired me to start our company, logistics is it has an extremely high turnover rate, right? I know our customers, they want loyalty, they want long-term loyalty, and I wanted to be able to provide a service that was reliable, that people could count on, year after year, not having new rep after new rep. So we started CFS, and we built. Have you seen the movie 300? Oh yeah. It's probably one of my favorite movies. We wanted, a team of Spartans versus that million-man army that just constantly shifts and changes. There's not that core passion and that drive to excel. And so we're very passionate about what we do. We get up every day, and I'm thankful that I get to work for myself. I get to work with people I love. I get to serve people that I love, and just happens that trucking was the vehicle. So.
Yeah, and I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, and it's when we talked about this a little bit on the panel that you were on in the business group, you're not always passionate necessarily. You find something you're good at, you find something you understand, but when you're a man of faith, there's a deeper calling. We'll talk about that here in a second, and that's the passion. Or the people obviously are what God cares about, and that connects the whole deal. Right. And then you're really just good at something that can be the vehicle that can provide the resources and so forth. But so with leading a company, kind of outside of logistics and things like that, but just like leading a company, being that guy in charge. I know, you're still a young guy, but you were a young guy there. Was there a specific moment where you felt God confirm, this is what I've called you to do? To lead a group of people.
He opened up doors, supernatural doors that only he could open. To give an example, our first employee, Bob. Mm-hmm. I was sitting at Radiant, 9:30 service, and I felt this older gentleman just staring me down. I could feel his eyes.
Like, man, we're in church. No,
yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, he's kind of creeping me out, but he's an incredible guy, and so I just felt him staring at me. He beamed over to me right after service. This was right about the time, I'd say a month before starting the company. And Bob had moved from Connecticut. He had a teaching job. He's been teaching at Christian schools, doing missionary work for the past 30 years. He moved down to Brandon, and his contract did not get renewed. And he's like, "Hey, do you know anybody that could help me get a job? I'm looking for some work." I'm like, "Well, I'm a young guy. I started the company when I was 23." So I'm like, "Yeah, I do know an opportunity if you want to learn logistics. I'm starting a company up in, a month from now, if you want to do it." He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And, he opened up doors like that. And fast forward, Bob and I were sitting at Starbucks reading over a 40-page manual I'd typed out, just draining my brain of all the information that I knew. And he's still with us today. So,
and it's been how many years have you started the company?
We're going on year 4.
Year 4.
Yeah.
So I know, I want to kind of just dive into the middle. I know you obviously started the company. You said you were sitting in church a month before you started it. So I know you were a believer, and you served the Lord for a while. That's part of your foundation, and but I know this. But, some of this I know because we've had time where we talked and so forth, and you've evolved the company into a marketplace business, and you're not ashamed of that at all, and I love that. Not only you're not ashamed about it, you put it out there first and foremost. And so, kind of diving into faith, in the workplace, because I think that there's a lot of people watching, and it's interesting because the questions are going to kind of weave in because you've turned this into, to a 7-figure, multi-7-figure business, which is not easy to do. I remember one of the masterminds we were involved with a couple years ago, where you were talking about, hey, this is my goal, and I think we were not even halfway through the semester of that, and you surpassed that and had to actually stretch your goal to almost double, if I'm not mistaken. So that's huge, and we'll get into that as well. But I know you give God credit for that and how He's really just kind of given you wisdom. But what are some ways that you practically implement your faith today in your company culture, day-to-day operations, things like that?
We are very outspoken about our faith. We put it on our website. We have prayer. We have scripture and prayer in our end of the week leaderboards. But, coming from a company, I didn't lead a big team, mm-hmm. So I had to figure out how to be a leader. And I read books on leadership. I tried to find ways to do it, but really scripture is what had helped me learn how to be a leader, looking at different biblical figures, the guys who did it really well, David, Solomon to some degree, and the guys who didn't do it well. What did they do? What did they not do that caused them to be a good leader? And how am I able to take that and emulate that in my own company? And it boils down to being a servant, serving people, and not putting your own interest above others. And, you know, I try to treat people as they want to be treated. You know, I look at people better than myself. If I've been given abilities and talents, I want to use them to help those around me. So I just say it's treating people how they want to be treated, working hard to help them, and, you know, giving God the glory. So.
Yeah, and what are some ways, because I know you do this with some of your key leaders, because we talked about this and you spend time with them, you know, so they kind of see you as this person now. They know you're a man of faith. In what ways do you disciple, you know, mentor, or, you know, spiritually encourage some of your team members? What are some things you've done?
It's really cool. You know, we've hired people that are not believers. However, good portion of our company we're believers, and, you know, I'll ask, you know, what do you need prayer for? What things are going on in your life that I can pray about with you for? And just being able to,
like, you care.
Yeah. I mean, I really do. I love our team. I'm incredibly blessed to have a team and a platform, and, you know, I love what I do. So just being able to openly express our faith in the marketplace has been a blessing, and, you know, it's proven fruit.
Yeah, I think that people, you know, looking at, you know, at employees, and, you know, even if they're non-believers, you know, I think that people care about themselves, and they have issues, and they have things that they have going on in their lives that, you know, they're going to bring into the workplace no matter what. And I think that that's really the key. You know, just showing that you care, just being there. You know, asking somebody. You know, a lot of times we as drivers, you know, we kind of talked before the show a little bit about, hey, you know, sales and pushing people, and, you know, we want to see that bottom line, and that we have to care about that. But, you know, not always coming at them from the standpoint of, hey, what more can you do? But taking that time, hey, how was your weekend? You know, how you doing? What's going on? You know, hey, how's your wife? You know, she was sick, or whatever it is. And I think that those things go a long way.
Definitely.
So kind of diving into the leadership and growth, you mentioned leaderships. Your company's, you know, grown to 7 figures over the last few years. What are some kingdom-minded leadership principles that have been most critical in that growth?
I'd certainly say tithing.
Okay.
I mean, the principle of tithing it's necessary.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the bare minimum what we should be doing. And as we're blessed, and, you know, with that tithe, the Lord gives us what we need as we continue to grow. Giving above and beyond the tithe is where, you know, we'll see financial fruits, but really just that servant mentality, and keeping that, and not allowing myself to ever hit a point where I'm like, oh, we've made it, or oh, this is about me. And it's very easy to do when you're given a title, a platform, and that's something that each and every day I try to check myself on. You know, giving God the first of everything. You know, when I start the morning, I like to start in scripture, prayer, before I speak to people, so I don't, you know, come off rude or aggressive. I want to give God the first of the day, the week, you know, sitting in church.
It's super important, because, I mean, the foundation, I mean, you know, if we expect Him to bless our day, I was just reading the other day Proverbs 16:3, where it says, commit your actions to the Lord, and He'll establish your plans. And, you know, we don't always look at it that way, to, you know, give the day to God, right? Because if I want to prosper, there's not a day that goes by that I don't want to be prosperous and successful.
Right.
Why wouldn't I start that with the Lord? A couple more questions in the leadership and scaling category. And I know we've talked about this, and this is a super challenge for business leaders. Scaling in general, growing. You know, obviously there's, you know, a large amount of businesses that go out of business within the first few years. That's the very volatile time. You know, but how has your leadership style evolved through the challenges of scaling?
I mean, we talked about it a few months back. You know, I was running into issues on how do I navigate the situation? How do I lead? And what I've had to change is how to actually properly delegate, not just hire people and make decisions for them.
Yeah.
You know, that has been extremely difficult. There's a time, you know, I'd catch myself. I'd be doing everything, trying to close deals, do accounting, take care of operations, and then when things don't go exactly how I want them to, I get upset.
Right.
So I had to learn how to train somebody properly, give them a goal, and empower them to hit those goals, and let them know, hey, if you make a mistake, I have your back. And, you know, turns out a lot of things are done better than I would do them. When you give a
That's
task
hard to do,
somebody,
though.
it is extremely difficult.
It's hard to do, and that is leadership. I mean, people don't understand, but that really is the definition of leadership, and it's hard to trust that, especially when it's your baby. You know, you're a perfectionist. You know, you want it done right, and you know, and you don't like mistakes. But given that rope or that ability for somebody to do that, that's a hard thing to do. For a lot of us leaders, and I've commended you for that, because I've watched that be one of the things that you've changed and implemented, and your grow. And the thing about it is, it's really the only way to grow, because you know, to get to the goals that we want to hit, you know, it's going to take people, and then whenever you have people, you're going to have mistakes.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to have issues. So I know we talked about this too, because we're in this kind of industry where, I mean, all industries have, you know, have hiccups and pitfalls and obstacles, but the types of industry that, you know, that we share some similarities in, there's a lot of corners that can be cut, a lot of temptation where you could possibly, you know, make a decision that might monetarily benefit you, but it kind of grinds against the integrity. So, you know, can you share a time when a faith-based, you know, decision went against the conventional business advice or the conventional way that the industries you're in, you know, does it, but turned out to be the right move?
Yeah. I think a good example, we were moving trailers for a customer of ours in Arkansas. And in our business, it's a acquire high, sell low, we take a margin, right? And in those cases, you don't necessarily want your customers to know how much you're making.
Right.
You know, they know we're making money, but how much? In this certain circumstance, you know, I'd say for our business, we aim for, you know, 10 to 15% margin conservatively. In this case, we were probably making closer to 15% on it. We accidentally had sent an invoice with the carrier pay on it, and I'm like, oh, darn. You know, immediately I'm like, my mind starts to go to, well, what am I going to say so we don't lose the customer? Or tell them, yes, this is exactly what I am making on this, and you know, we can discuss your thoughts about that. Just a lot of times people try to sweep things under the rug. In this case, I could take it head on and say, yes, this is what we are billing, and let the customer react and see their thoughts on it. And I was expecting an answer, that's ridiculous, you shouldn't be making that on this. And she goes, that's all you're making? You know, and she actually ended up tacking a few extra $1,000s onto that bill because of the work that we had done. And, you know, everything in me was pushing and formulating these ideas to find a way out of it. But, you know, when you try to sweep things under the rug and you don't operate honestly, then it ends up coming out. And
that's a great example, and it's hard to do as well, because you know, you immediately there's other companies and there's other ways, and I'm sure where you've come from in the past, there's strategies to overcome that, but being up front like that, you know, is takes integrity, and that's a perfect example of that. You know, some challenges and breakthroughs that you've experienced over the years. You know, what do you think's been the biggest challenge as a kingdom business leader? And how did your faith guide you through it? What do you think the biggest challenge you faced?
I think I have all these ideas, you know, I see something, my mind works in a business manner, so I find an opportunity, instead of just running to it, I have to check myself, slow down, and let the Lord's time play out.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to make mistakes when you just want to jump from thing to thing to thing, and when it's not God's timing, that's often where you make mistakes. You face losses, you lose people. So just being aware, am I moving on my own speed and my own strength, or is the Lord really directing me and calling me to move at this time? So,
speaking of timing, and 2 more questions here, but how do you handle seasons where business goals and God's timing don't seem to align? Because I know that you're a mover and a shaker. You want to, you're like me, you're like most business leaders that are watching. You want it now, you want it all, but there's that timing issue, right? So when your business goals don't line up to God's timing, how do you handle that? Seasons like that.
I just remember the past. When it's clearly not the Lord's time and He's saying no. I remember times when I wanted promotions, times when I wanted things to go my way, and if they had gone my way, I would have fallen into a pit.
Yeah.
And there's times where, He shows up. The Lord's timing is perfect. He shows up at the right time, in the right season, at the right moment, and there's things that I can't comprehend even when I think I do.
Yeah.
But I just remember the past and what He has done in my personal life, my business, in my marriage, and I know that He's good. He's faithful. So
Yes, He is, man. How do you measure success beyond just revenue?
impacting people's lives. It's cool to see people hit their goals. It's cool to have somebody say, I love waking up and working today, or hey, you guys are providing a service that is just different. That to me means the world. Revenue isn't just the driver, it's the impact that we're able to have with the vehicle.
So as we wrap up here today, you got entrepreneurs watching, you got business leaders watching, you got people that might be struggling with their business. They're watching it because the title got their attention. Hey, how to grow a kingdom business to 7 figures. Hey, I want to do that. So what advice would you give other Christian business leaders and entrepreneurs and owners that are watching right now who want to integrate faith into their business but feel pressure to separate the two?
I think it's Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto you.
That sums it up right there, man. That's awesome. I love what you're doing. You're making an impact, not just in the kingdom, not just in the logistics world, man, but with your employees, their families. I know legacy. You're a young guy, but legacy is already something you're thinking about.
Thank you.
And I just can't wait to see the growth and everything that God continues to do in your business, man.
I appreciate you very much, Dave.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, man. Appreciate you, bro.
Love you.
Hey, I hope that interview was a blessing. I can't wait to see you guys next time on GC Talks.